Hello, everyone. My name is Lars. Once again, I'm here with On the Fringes of Sound, and today we are talking to Nikolas Wolf, probably better known under his alias Desolation Plains. How's it going, Nick?
Great, great. How about you?
I'm doing pretty good. Thanks for joining us on here. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I haven't done this ever, so thanks
Oh,
for having
ever.
me on. I mean, outside, well, I mean, I've used Zoom before, but whatever.
Pandemic.
But
Who hasn't used Zoom at this point, right?
exactly, I basically live in it.
It's
But yeah,
amazing. I want out of this space.
yeah.
We're talking first about your upcoming album. It's called Kingdom Fall. So you're working on it right now. You sent me a preview of it, and I listened to a bit of it. It sounded really awesome so far. So what can you tell us about it at this point in time?
Yeah. First of all, thanks for listening. It's pretty rough right now, but it's like I have this idea where if I share things, the idea will manifest and thus be brought into life. Otherwise, I'll look like a lying fool. So yeah,
Wow.
currently working on it. Yeah. So as far as the release, like if you've certainly listened to probably the sort of Hailstone I put out last year, let's say compared to that, it's quite a different experience. It's less, kind of that 8-bit minimal, I guess I would say sort of Hailstone was. It ran off of one specific synthesizer and kind of sequenced it all in that. Kingdom Fall is more, there's a lot more percussion involved in it. My whole like synthesizer rig is a bit different. It's a little more complex for what I'm trying to put out. I'd say that Kingdom Fall has kind of a, for lack of better terms, like a jungle vibe or something, or very like nature. I don't know. It's kind of weird. It's a little less militant. It's different. It's a
When I
different
listened
direction.
to it, like I noticed there was a lot more like it veered into ambient territory on a couple of the tracks. And the big thing I noticed like kind of throughout was just how like caked in the percussion was this time around. Like it is like big and thick drums, and I like it.
Yeah, no, that's actually kind of where I started with this album. Is the last one I did was, very much like synthesizer forward. It was an exploration. If we want to get into like synthland, like exploration to FM synthesis. It's like my brain is kind of like, well, I don't understand this. I need to like just dive in and do it, turn all the knobs, learn all the things. So I got like kind of an okay idea on that. And this time has been more like, okay, let's focus on percussion. Let's focus on like, designing a drum set or a drum kit and things like that. I'll admit I'm pretty new to music creation. Like this, for the most part, has been a pandemic thing for me. So yeah, just kind of learning as I go. But yeah, a lot of this album really started in that exploration of percussion, I guess. The drums are front and center basically for a lot of it, just because that's kind of where, instead of starting with a melody or something, I would start with drums and then kind of build off of those instead.
Oh,
Whereas
okay,
sort of
gotcha.
Hailstone was more like here's a fun little ditty I made. Let's build around that.
Okay, so on your first album, you included an interactive RPG kind of element, the mobile app, the tabletop with the board and the figurine and everything, which really cool setup. Are we looking at anything like that for this upcoming album?
So short answer is yes. It's like I love cassettes. I love, the idea of them. I love collecting them, all that. I like the idea of being able to do something with it. Like back in the day, it's like the coolest thing that ever happened to me was like, oh, hey, mom bought checks again. But then you like look at the checks box and you're like, what? They came out with a game, Chex Quest? This is like Doom, except you're playing, in like a checks realm. Stuff like that. Like that stuff gets me excited. So,
Right.
uh, so anyway, with that, I mean, it's cool. It's
I'm
really
not gonna
cool.
lie. I played Chex Quest a few times. It was a
Yeah.
fun little game.
Yeah, you have packaging, and it's like, well, how can you extend or further like the enjoyment of this package that you're sending to people? And to me, that's super important. I think it's a lot of fun. It's another way to like share some sort of world building experience and things. And so like with Kingdom Fall, for instance, it's, I've been like mulling around the idea of like, okay, what is the world? Like what am I trying to convey here? And it's really this like front to back, like humanity is like on its last legs. We have this imperial situation where like it's crumbling and it's giving, room for the natural realm to rise again. So I've had a couple ideas for games where it'd be like, you're trying to escape a castle dungeon as the whole thing is falling apart and everyone's killing each other, or as a druid reclaiming something. So short answer is, yeah, I definitely want to do something like that. This time around, it might manifest more as like a tabletop paper and dice RPG kind of thing. Because I'll be honest, the whole app perspective of things is like a lot of work. It takes some time. So for perspective, like when I put together sort of Hailstone, the app, that was, again, manifesting my intentions. I put the map on the cassette before I even had the game developed. And I told people, like, I am going to make a game that, releases with this album. And everyone got really excited. I'm like, well, now I got to do it. So
okay, gotcha.
200 hours later, I have this cool app that's available on iOS and Android or whatever.
I'm sure pretty much everyone's downloaded it at this point. I downloaded it. I'm not going to lie, I got stuck.
I guess this is a two-parter. This might segue. I might ramble just a little bit more. The Kingdom Fall might have some sort of like app representation or something. I mean, the cool thing is now that sort of Hailstone is done, I can kind of write new stories in that platform and kind of just like continually build off of that, which is exciting for me. The other idea I had was basically just like keep Kingdom Fall a little lighter on that. I do want to re-release sort of Hailstone at some point this year as a concise package, I guess. So if anything, I would see maybe expanding on the sort of Hailstone app itself and add like a few more elements that I couldn't get around to last year, like being able to cast spells or like having a little more interaction with the realm and things, actually rolling for like some sort of initiative or saving throws, things like that. Make it feel more board gear, role-playing game-ish, I guess. But
gotcha. So when you're when you're coming up with the idea for like the interactive element for one of your albums, right? So are these stories, are they like influenced by like D&D campaigns that you like to do, or like do you like start completely fresh?
So I've started completely fresh so far. I do, we talked about this just a minute before the interview here, but I do roll with a couple of really cool people, with like D&D and role-playing games and stuff. And playing with them has been a major influence for me. Not just for the RPG side of things, but they're all like really fantastic, creative people, artists, musicians, really creative people, I guess. So, just surrounding myself with that kind of energy definitely filters into these releases, which brings a tear to my eye almost. It makes me really happy.
Yeah, it's always great to have people around you that are like helping support, giving you inspiration as well. I feel like that's a big part of why I hang out on Twitter so much. It's just because I like to listen to what everybody else is doing. It's like it inspires me when I go to make something. So while we're talking about the app that you built, right? So how did you learn how to make this app? Are you a self-taught programmer? Are you a programmer by trade?
Well, it all started when I was 3 years old. No, actually, for real though. My family is just like a ton of nerds. It's kind of weird. So my dad, he's a software developer. He's been doing that as a kid. Even he was like very into computers, basically. So he kind of grew up with it.
Oh, and I think that must have been like around the 80s when like programming was like real hard.
Yeah. I mean, there's a picture of him floating around on the internet somewhere where he's like sitting with his like huge chunky glasses as a 12-year-old, just like super happy typing on this TI-99 or something.
Oh, wow.
It's pretty great, like early 80s or even earlier than that, probably. I don't know. It's hard to tell. Anyway, so yeah, outside of that though, it's like you probably grew up in this time frame too, but the mid 90s is like a young teenager was like really quite a playground as far as like internet goes. You think about Angel Fire and GeoCities and, building your own websites and all this like stuff like that really captivated. Yeah, me too. Really captivated me. So by 2001, me being like a 17-year-old or whatever, like I started, apprenticing professionally in a small development shop and just kind of like stuck with it. So I've been at this, for 20 years now, I guess. Yeah, I mean, I'm not sick of it. Like I absolutely love it. The difficult thing for me though is doing side projects, especially when work's kind of busy or whatever, because like you're doing it, if you're programming 8 hours a day and then after that you're like, gee, I want to program more. That's rare. So
Yeah, I mean, I pretty much just work in an office doing clerical work. So whenever I come home after spending 8 hours staring at a computer screen, I love coming home and staring at that computer screen for a few more hours.
yeah, that's exactly it. So that's the only thing that inhibits me from doing it again. This year, it kind of depends. I have this loose idea that I'm going to take like a couple of weeks off in April just to solely focus on creative endeavors. And if I can pull the trigger on that, there is some possibility I could do some sort of app. Yeah, it might just be some sort of fun text adventure or something, or paper and dice or something like that. But
a text adventure, I remember those. You would have to figure
yeah,
out exactly what you're supposed to type in to get the game to move forward.
That's how sort of Hailstone started. Actually, it started as a text adventure, and then I accidentally put some buttons on it, and then it became what it is today. But
I was going to keep it simple, but then I added a button or two, and I was like, well, crap, I guess I got to keep going with this now.
Yeah, but yeah, it was very much like it started as like a return, or no, not return, but just like Zork or I don't know, whatever those 80s, text adventures were. But yeah,
man, they required so much. What is that? What's that word? Imagination.
Yeah, it really did.
It was amazing back before Candy Crush and whatnot. So I remember seeing a lot of videos of you when you were making your first album. You used the Electron Digitact for a lot of your drums and stuff. Is that still a central part of your workflow? And do you have any other pieces of gear that you like to use pretty regularly in your work?
Yes. Digitact has been really, when I first purchased that was kind of like a holy crap, this is what I want to do experience kind of thing. I really started this adventure in 2019. I started with a Moog Grandmother. Wow.
Beautiful.
So yeah, I picked up a Grandmother because way back in the day, like 2002, 2003, I owned a Moog Concert Mate, which is basically like pre-Grandma synthesizer. They're virtually identical, except that the Grandmother, has added kind of like the submodular thing and a couple other whistles and bells. But anyways, I was like jonesing for that. So I picked up a Grandmother and was like, yes, this is great. But, just playing a single synthesizer is kind of limiting unless you get like really creative with it. So it started me on this whole like rabbit hole of like, well, I'll try Novation Circuit for a while because I need something to like sequence this stuff. And I would like a tiny little drum kit to go with it. I did some Volca stuff. And then finally I just picked up a Digitact, and that was like something in my brain clicked with it. It was like, wow, this is where I want to focus my time and energy. It's like the Electron workflow, being a developer, like immediately like clicked with me. It's like I just understood it almost immediately. Then it's like, I picked up I picked up the Analog 4 after that, and that's when I started doing some of this Farcaster stuff. Okay. Farcaster was very much like Digitact, Analog 4, and then the Grandmother on top of that. So very much like an analog synthesizer experience. And then I picked up the Digitone. And then Digitone is where Sword of Hailstone was created. That Sword of Hailstone was created solely on the Digitone or Digatone. I don't know how they say it.
That's okay. Yeah, apparently I said Digitact wrong.
It's okay. It's those darn Swedes. Yeah. But anyways, like they all have sequencers. All of their gear has like some really amazing sequencer features. They all work the same way. Sword of Hailstone was kind of that part in this journey where I was like, okay, I'm just going to learn all of the sequencing on this. I'm going to learn all the FM synthesis and punch out an album on this one device, which was great. But now it's like, you can kind of like, it's a mess back here, but there's like some of my rig,
Oh, okay. One thing I notice that isn't really there is a computer. So most of what you do is all hardware, right?
So yeah. That's the other part of Electron I'm like really loving right now is, we talk about computers and you talk about like the amount of time sitting in front of computers, especially if you have a job that requires you to. the last thing I want to do most days is go sit at a computer to do like hobby stuff. Like,
Right.
I know there's a part of me where it's like, I'm not going to lose my eyesight doing this for the next 40 years. But then there's a part in the back of my brain that's like, well, what if you do? You know, but you talk about health issues. You talk about like, you know, this idea of just being glued in front of screens all the time. It's like, well, I don't want a hobby like that. I want a hobby where I can pull myself out of the computer and put myself, you know, unfortunately in front of other boxes with different screens. But, you know, for the most part, it's all very tactile. It's, you know, a lot more knobs and buttons. I feel like there's a certain amount of expression that can be conveyed in, you know, compared to a computer, really a more limited environment. So that's what's kind of got me stuck on these devices, because at the end of the day, you can do all this on a computer really easily. I started messing with Ableton recently, and you know, really, I took a class a couple months ago too, just like a little 3-week thing. And
for Ableton?
For Ableton, you know, it was good. At the end of it, I'm like, holy crap, you can do so much with Ableton. But you know, by the end of it, I'm looking at Ableton and, you know, my fun real life toys, and I'm like, well, I don't want to sit in front of the computer more. You know, like there's ways around it. You can get a MIDI device to help you out with it, but you know, it's just I feel a little confined to the screen still. So
like I use Native Instruments Machine, and it's kind of the same thing. Like it requires the computer to run everything. The controllers, like I have the micro, so I have like a little less functionality on the controller, but the original like Mark 1 that I had screens on it. So like I could spend a lot of time not staring at the screen, but I was staring at little screens on this box. So, you know, I think that's just part of being an electronic musician. Is just, you're going to stare at screens. That's all you're going to do. You're just going to stare at a series of screens.
You know, it's like I could act like I'm a purist all I want, but at the end of the day, it's like these electronic devices are computers, and they do have tiny screens. At least there's like some component where I feel like I can exit that mode for a bit, you know, and actually sit in front of a MIDI keyboard and pound out some ideas versus like whatever else the kids do these days.
Click.
Yeah. So totally. I am giving up some precision for that experience, I guess, and maybe that's like selfish for me, but at the same time, like, I'll be honest, I'm making all this stuff for myself, kind of, you know, it's kind of fun.
Yeah. I hear you. It's like, it's for me, but you guys are along for the ride.
Yeah. No, I definitely like sharing it, but like if something sounds a little weird, it's probably because like I'm focusing too much on trying to do it on these hardware synthesizers than like actually curating something in a professional DAW, DAW-like situation or something, but that's okay. I can live with it. So
the problem I've noticed with like using a DAW for most of what I do is like you can just endlessly tweak things. Like nothing is permanent. You can go back, and if you did something and you don't quite like it, oh well, let me just clip, cut, fade, blah 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 blah. Like I was talking to Michael Sunwarper the other day about this, and it's just like, no, like you play it out, and then what you got is what you got. Make it sound good.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly it. And I think there's like, you know, it definitely opens up for mistakes. Like there's like specifically 2 parts in Sort of Hailstone, which I won't say at all, but like there are 2 parts where I'm like, oh my God, that could have been so much better. But you know what? It's out there. It doesn't really matter anymore. And I can free up my mind from that experience to work on something else right now.
Exactly.
You know, which I think that's important to like get stuff done, you know?
Oh yeah. Well, it's like a lot of times we're our own worst critic, and we'll just keep going back and just tweaking. And then next thing you know, it's like, you're not putting anything out there. Like,
Yep, exactly. And I can totally get stuck in that headspace, you know, of just like, it's not good enough, but at the end of the day, sometimes you just have to, let it go. But
exactly. You mentioned your other project, Farcaster. Is there anything coming up for Farcaster? Are you still working on that project, or has Desolation Plains just kind of taken over everything?
So I found this cool application called Ableton, and
I think I've heard of that. Huh.
For real. I'm kind of like screwing around in it again. And I think actually the next Farcaster album or whatever material is probably going to be coming from that aspect.
Okay. Stepping away from the hardware for Farcaster.
Yeah. We'll kind of see what happens. And it's more just like, just to teach myself, like, here's what using a DAW is like for creating music or whatever. Yeah, I do have a couple like tracks I'm kind of like holding on to. I want to see if I can kind of expand on them a little bit more and create a full, I'd love to punch out like a 35, 40-minute album of something. But yeah, it kind of keeps going with that, kind of cinematic space music kind of thing. Some stuff that I was starting last year to September 2020. Oh boy, the last 2 years are really kind of like, it's a mind warp for me. Yeah, so that EP I released like in September of 2020 or whatever, it's going to be like quite a bit different than that. It's not going to be quite as like poppy or like, I don't know. It's hard to say. There's not much percussion in this. It's more like, more straight up like analog synthesizer, software synthesizers. Yeah, I don't know. We'll kind of see what happens with that. That project has been so hard for me for some reason, because instead of Kingdom Fall, I was gonna start working on another, or like a Farcaster album, and I got like a couple singles going. I posted a couple because it's like, they don't really fit anywhere, but I want to like share them. There's like been kind of like this weird identity crisis with it in my own brain, like what do I want this to be? And sometimes it feels like I'm trying too hard. So this time I'm just like, hey, whatever, I'm going to stick to like 2 like specific synthesizers. I'm going to like do some basic things with them and grow off of that and see what happens. And
do you feel like Desolation Plains and Farcaster have any kind of overlap, or do you try to keep them like as separate as possible?
that's a great question. I mean, Farcaster EP that I put out, the way I was looking at Desolation Plains and Farcaster for a while was Farcaster was going to be more kind of like a true analog synthesis kind of situation, specifically like my build for that one was going to be Digitact, which is not an analog synthesizer, the grandmother, and an analog 4, right? So like a lot of like, wispy leads and, thick bass kind of thing. Desolation Plains was more like kind of that FM synthesis take, that's where like that build was like Digitact, Digitone, and grandmother. So like really it's just like swapping out a couple instruments, and then like, from a, we'll say, world building perspective, it's like, okay, I'm in space. What does space music sound like? Or like I'm in fantasy world. What does fantasy world sound like? And, just trying to like hone in on these like different vibes or whatever.
So like whenever I listen to your Farcaster stuff, like it always kind of reminded me of like if you go back to like the 70s or 80s and you kind of see some of those like low budget sci-fi horror movies they made, like that was always kind of like the vibe I picked up from Farcaster.
Good, because that's exactly that's the vibe perfect. I want for it. Yeah, actually at that point in time I was watching like the probably trashiest, like goofiest 70s 80s sci-fi a person could find. It's just like the drivel you find on like Amazon Prime or something. It's like, oh, here's this weird subsection of 70s sci-fi that people probably haven't watched for decades, and you just go with that, and you find out like some of them have like really amazing soundtracks and stuff, and you're like, well, how is this buried so far deep in like media, when this should be like pulled out? This should be celebrated in some way or another.
Amazon Prime is a wealth of like, and it's such a crapshoot because me and my wife will occasionally just go through Amazon Prime and just like, oh, okay, let's watch that. And it's like sometimes bad, and other times it's like, hey, that was pretty good actually. So you basically kind of divided up as Desolation Plains is definitely like your fantasy realm kind of music, and then Farcaster is that sci-fi horror kind of vibe.
Yeah, sci-fi horror kind of, very like John Carpenter was, influenced as he is for just about anyone who plays a synthesizer. But, definitely like, that 70s, 80s era was really like, there's a lot of true gems in that. I think that was probably like an important time anyways, just because synthesizers were like, in their own ways, like having a resurgence, or like people were holding on to them and they're like, yes, we can actually do some really amazing things on these. And it just like really formed sci-fi and horror at the time. I think it's fun. It's like I could No, I won't go there. I don't know. I was going to talk about synthwave a bit, but it's like, okay, sorry. There's like two things in my brain right now. It's like synthwave is a celebration of our current day interpretation of what the 80s were or something. You know, it's like, oh yeah, Miami and crazy lights and stuff like that. And, you know, it's like fun. That's fine. That's great. Like, you know, yeah, I definitely like got caught up in that a few years ago. But like, you know, to go back to 70s and 80s and like look at the material that was actually being created then, you know, musically or, you know, for videos and stuff, like it was kind of a totally different vibe. It was, you know, I feel like there was a lot more like almost melancholic portions and songs, or they're a little more minimal. They weren't like, you know, just slamming you all the time like synthwave is. I feel like there was a little more like space to breathe and to like actually like hear something in the background in a song where it's not just like pummeling you all the time. But anyway.
Yeah, I understand where you're coming from. That's kind of how I feel about synthwave too, because just the aesthetic of synthwave, like it's like, hey, this is what the 80s looked like. It's like, that is not what the 80s looked like, guys. Like, I remember everything being brown and lots of wood paneling. Okay.
Exactly.
That's what I remember from the 80s.
Exactly. It's like, that's my like grandma's house, you know, it's shag carpet, wood panel, floral couch, and a whole lot of smoking.
Just everybody smoked. Everybody smoked. You could smoke in fast food restaurants. Like just smoke. Let's just smoke. Hey, can I have a smoke? Yeah. It was wild. It was a wild time. I feel you on synthwave. I like vaporwave as well, but I feel like it's kind of the same problem. Like, that's not what the 80s looked like, guys. Like,
I mean, it's like some sort of aesthetic, and it's like I get caught up in them. I think they're really enjoyable in their own ways, but like, I don't know. I feel like there's other realms to explore, and you know,
absolutely.
I kind of want to get back into Farcaster stuff a lot more head on now. I don't know. We'll see what happens after this album release. I'll probably take a couple months off, but then focus on that a bit.
Get a little reboot and then come back to it. I also wanted to ask, we were talking about this a little bit before the interview. You said something about like you may be starting a label in the near future?
Yeah, kind of. Okay, well, not kind of. Like, well, we'll see how it goes. Like, I have no clue. So it's kind of for my own stuff immediately, you know, so I would be releasing Desolation Plains and Farcaster under this. The label itself, I'm looking to call it, well, it is going to be called Old Stories. So, you know, vague enough where you can fit a bunch of different things under it, but Old Stories. So what I'm planning for this is, you know, really, a place to release music, a place to release TTRPGs, you know, games, other media and art forms and stuff like that. It'll be my couple of projects. I do have a couple other people I would be interested in helping them out with producing tapes and, you know, selling under that name or whatever. But so we'll kind of see what happens from there. I mean, ultimately, if you sell stuff in this world or this country specifically, you know, the man wants a cut, and having an entity, you know, it kind of helps like keep the numbers in line. But anyway, outside of that, I think I am truly excited about it, just because like it will be a fun way to kind of like keep all of my like random ideas somewhat concise and under the same roof or whatever. We'll see. I'm hoping to like get a little bit more information on that probably around the time Kingdom Fall releases. I'll probably have some sort of not release party, you know, but
big reveal.
A big reveal. So I'm hoping to get like Kingdom Fall under there. I'm hoping to re-release in one way or another sort of Hailstone and its compilation album False Prophecies. You know, False Prophecies is like a 1.5 kind of thing, but
I kind of consider it like kind of like the companion album basically to the original one. That's kind of how it felt to me.
That's exactly it. You know, it's kind of like the tracks lost along the way, and you know, that's why they were presented the way they were in the app. If I were to see like my perfect self align for mid 2022, it'd be like a sort of Hailstone kind of box set thing with like a revamped sort of Hailstone app to go with it. Kingdom Fall. There's a project or two from a pal that I work with. He does a lot of like cool like lo-fi beats, also very like spacey, you know, very much in that like kind of vintage sci-fi realm here. He goes by Sorcxrxr. Current album out there, he released it, I think, in 2020 around the time Farcaster came out. We actually tried doing a split cassette together, did a Kickstarter, but was like $50 short or something. It was kind of a bummer.
Damn.
But dang.
So close. Thanks for joining us. Really appreciate it. Everybody, make sure you're following him on Bandcamp so you can get all the updates. Follow him on Twitter as well. He be tweeting. Yeah.
I do it a lot. I do it too much. It's kind of a vice, but it's kind of the only social interaction I have during the pandemic. So, I
mean, I feel you on that. I have more social interaction than I want in real life. So I just kind of retreat to Twitter. It's a great place.
Right. For sure.
All right. Appreciate you joining us, Nick. We'll talk to you again soon.
Cool. Thanks for having me.
Oh, no problem.